Thank you, sharEvery Global Foundation. One of the concerns is about engagement in the classroom. In America, when a child leaves an ESL classroom, when him or her goes out, there is English everywhere. There is a lot of input of English. He goes to the market, there is English. He turns on the radio, there is English. So this input of English is vast. And according to research, children can learn English within 6 months. But when we're learning English as a foreign language, that can be more challenging. It's a lot like in the Caribbean, where we learn French or Spanish. That's more challenging because the language context in the Caribbean is English. And some of the work that I've done, I would like to share a few strategies. Some of them are do's, some of them are don'ts, as we begin to embrace this journey of exposing children to language. One of my note is at no time should we give the children the impression that English is by any means better than their language. We want to avoid that. As we teach them how to appreciate another language, we should never, ever give them the impression that English is superior. English is just another language that gives them access to a different world, but it's not a better or superior language. So let's ensure that we never, ever, ever give that in the classroom. I want you to think about a time when you couldn't understand a language. Let's say you traveled to another part of the world. What did you wish you had? Or what did you wish someone could have done to help you understand? I just want you to think of that for 1 second. Somebody said training with the pronunciation and accent fluency, understanding a mother language, vocabulary, okay? If you were to land in Japan and you couldn't understand a word that the Japanese were saying, what would you wish you had? Or what would you wish someone could have done to help you understand what they were saying? A translator. I love that. Beautiful. So maybe my next question should be now, have you ever given your students the opportunity to use a translator app in the classroom? If we're saying that we would have loved to have had a translator, just think about it. Have you ever thought of using it in the classroom? Now, in many of our classrooms, we've taught English to students using what is called the grammar translation approach. That was how I was taught French and Spanish in the Caribbean. That does not work. The grammar and translation approach is all about grammar. It's about words and translations. So they would give us a paragraph, and then they would ask us to translate it. Guess what? I never learned Spanish. I never understood it. Because what they used was called the grammar translation approach, which is tons of vocabulary words and getting children to translate from one language to the next. That is not effective. Yet it is used all over the world to teach English as a foreign language. It's not going to work. The students are not going to remember it because it's actually an ineffective approach. Another thing that we have to consider as we work with the students in our classroom, Many of us, we like to correct the grammar of our students. So as children try to speak in the language, we're quick to correct the pronouns. We're quick to correct the tenses. What it does, it shuts the child down. And after a while, the child will not try again. So we want to avoid this as we're trying to create engagement, as we're trying to get children excited to speak and participate. We always have to be cognizant of the fact that we do not want to correct them constantly. Think about it as an adult. If you're taking a course and every time you raise your hand to say something, the teacher corrects your pronunciation or corrects your grammar or your pronouns or your verbs, you're going to become self-conscious. You're going to feel defeated and deflated, and you're not going to want to try. So as you go back to your schools, limit the amount of correcting that you do. Let the children feel empowered to try. We want them to try. We want them to speak because it takes a lot of courage to speak. But if we're always correcting, they're not going to do it. As you also work with them, I want you to consider whether there are cognates in their language and English. That might be another segue to get them interested in the language. In French and English, there are so many cognates. In Spanish and English, there are so many cognates, so many similar roots. As you work with your students, one way to help them learn and remember, think of English words and words in their language and how they might be similar. For example, in Spanish, universal is universal. It's spelled exactly the same way, but pronounced differently. Are there words like that that students might be able to see a commonality between English and their language? That's going to help them retain some of what you're teaching. In ESL and in TOEFL, there is something called the silent period. During the silent period, children are listening. Children are absorbing. They're not confident to speak, but they're learning. So if you try certain strategies, asking them questions, let's say you were able to give a command in English, you might see them doing the action. So that means they're understanding, but they might never raise their hand to speak. It's called the silent period. They're learning the language, but they're not comfortable yet to try. There is Stephen Krashen. I'm not sure how many of you may have heard of him. Stephen Krashen talks about making input comprehensible. That means anything we're teaching children in English, if we want them to retain it, they must understand it. If they're not understanding it, they're not going to retain it. You're going to try it with them 2 weeks from then, and they will not be able to respond. So Krashen says, whatever we're teaching our children, it must be comprehensible. It must be understandable. He also talks about something called the affective filter. And he says, if children are anxious in the classroom, if children are unhappy, they're not going to learn the language. So he says the classroom environment must be warm and friendly, filled with fun, and then children will want to participate. So that's called the affective filter. And that is making children feel comfortable, making children feel celebrated. Then they're going to want to try to experiment with the language. Let's think of the motivation of our students. Are children motivated to learn English? A child who's motivated to learn English, according to research, will learn it faster. So what are we saying to our students to motivate them to want to learn the language? In the Caribbean, I grew up from a family of 10 children, and I'm from an island known as St. Lucia. My parents didn't have much education, but one of the things my parents taught us, that the only way to get social mobility, the only way to get a good job, we were told, is through education. That was what we were told as a child. So based on that, my brothers and sisters and I, we were motivated to go to school. We felt that if we go to school and get a good education, we can get a good job. How are we motivating children to want to learn the language? What are we saying about the language? So children have to be motivated to even want to learn the language. And one of the ways to motivate them, use their interests as one of the ways to motivate your children. So let's look at some strategies quickly, just to whet your appetite. As you go into your classroom, consider putting labels around your classroom in English. So put English labels on your books, English label on the laptop, on the computer, on the board, English label on the rug. So when children come in, they could see all of these words along with the pictures. By the time they've spent a month in the classroom, they're going to know these words in English. Consider labeling. Label the chairs, label the table, label the desk, label the wall. Using English words so that children can pick up the language easily. Use visual support. For example, if I showed you this word pomme in French, you might wonder, Val, what are you talking about? But once I add the picture, instantly you're like, oh, she's referring to an apple. Use visual support. If I gave you this word, livre, again, you'd be confused. But if I added the picture, you'll be, oh, that's a book. That's what we do. You add pictures to words as much as you can. That, according to research, it reduces the stress where the child has to translate and try to understand what we're saying. Pictures with words will help your students become more engaged. Take a look at this one. We're building on the same word livre. Now we have a phrase, ouvrez votre livre, and it shows the picture. So the child might say, oh, it's an open book. Yes, it means open your book. We're still using the word livre, and now we're saying fermez votre livre. And the child could look at the picture and say, oh, she means close the book. As we use pictures with words, as we use pictures with expressions, it's going to help children pick up the language. Technology. Technology is a must. Technology provides ways that children can play video games, different kinds of games, different kinds of activities that will help them learn the language. We need some sort of technology. The technology also provides translations, and the technology provides visual support. Technology provides tactile support. Technology allows children to work with other children, maybe children who speak the language, and that helps them to pick up the language. So we need as much technology in the classroom as we can find. That will help them play games which are fun in English. It will help them work with other children who could speak English. It provides pictures and videos as well. Now, these are strategies to help you when your children are writing English. I teach writing. It's one of my areas that I work with a lot of students, even adults. Sentence starters helps students start. Students always say to me, I don't know how to begin. A sentence starter will help you. Word banks can help you. A list of words. So if you want a child to talk about a day at the beach, instead of sending students to write about the beach, give them a list of words about the beach. Give them the pictures to support you, and then give them 2 or 3 sentence starters. I know it's a lot. Maybe I may have to come back and demonstrate some of the strategies to you. So this is just introductory, so that hopefully you could glean some strategies, or at least one strategy that you can go back with. Sentence starters, word banks, before you send your students out to write. Increase wait time. When you're asking students questions, don't give them a minute, don't give them a few seconds. You have to give them time to think. Because sometimes they're translating it and they need some time. Not every child can answer a question like that. So you need to give them a little bit more time to think of the response. Maybe even translate the response from their language to English, and then let them speak. So increase the time that they wait in. Use authentic material and experiences. Because there isn't as much English outside of the classroom, you have to create experiences in the classroom. So for example, you might want to set up a small section in your classroom one day as a restaurant, practicing how to order food on a menu. You might want to take some boxes of groceries, things that you no longer use, an old box of cereal, an old can of evaporated milk. Bring those things to the classroom. Put labels on it. Let children pretend they're in a supermarket and they're trying to purchase these items. So create authentic experiences for children to practice. If you can afford it, do a field trip with them. Take them outside of the classroom, show them things, and let them experience English. As they go outside, talk to them in English, show them the trees, talk about the trees in English, talk about the sky and the clouds in English. Role play. Let the children pretend. If you want students to practice a conversation, you can have one student be a mom, one student be a child, and let them practice how to ask permission to go to a party, how to ask permission to go to the beach. Or one child could be a teacher, one child could be a student, and let them role play. Let them ask each other questions. Maybe you want them to talk about a movie that they saw, and you make them role play. Use music and the lyrics of songs. Our children love music. Let them listen to English songs. If you can even find the karaoke version, you give them the karaoke version and you let them come up front to sing the English words to the music. They will learn that song in English in 1 week. They will know the song. Use songs. Use music. Play games with them. There is a game called Simon Says. Simon says, jump, and everybody will jump. Simon says, pick up the book, pick up the book. You could play Simon Says with children in English. As they do the actions, you could tell if they're understanding or not. So you will think of, what are the actions that I want them to learn today? Simon says, run to the front of the class. And then you will see who's running to the front and who's still standing there. You know who's understanding and who's not. So Simon Says is a great game to get children excited and enjoying English. And it's a great way to see who's understanding it as well. Use television programs. Children love TV. They love social media. Anything that you know that they love to watch, if you could get it and play it and it's clean, play it in the classroom. Let them watch the news. Let them watch family shows. Let them watch SpongeBob if they're little kids. Find the things that they love. Dora the Explorer if they're teens. What are the teen movies they watch? You could even let them watch some of the Bollywood movies. If they're clean, you could make them watch one movie in English. And if you have it in your language, let them watch both versions. So they're seeing the English version and they're seeing the version in their language. That also lets the students know that you're celebrating their language. We don't want them to think that English is better. English is just another language. Show them movies, animated film, the news, anything they love to watch. Provide group activities. If you have students in your class and there's some children who are stronger in English than others, you could put a child who's strong in the language with a child who's not that strong. That's going to help guide them. So pair the children with those who are stronger, who speak English more than others. It's going to help them pick up the language as well. I wanted you to get a sense of some strategies that you can go back, even if it's one, at least one or two, you can grab from this session and go back into your classroom and try it.